Well, I've waited a long time to make this video, not quite sure how I would tackle it, and, well, then my Skyhopper toy fell off the top shelf, and I realized, okay, that was a sign, it's time to make it. Yep, a video about the Star Wars Skyhopper. What the heck am I talking about? Well, if you're a casual Star Wars fan, you may have no idea what I'm talking about, because it's one of the greatest Star Wars ships that just doesn't get the recognition it should have. I mean, of course, there's the famous ships like, your X-Wing fighter or your aluminum Falcon, but outside of the ones that most of pop culture recognizes from the toys or the movies, the more you dig, the deeper you go into the Star Wars hole, the weirder the ships get. And, after a trilogy or two and a couple of expanded universe novels and a whole bunch of cartoons, there's some pretty weird-looking Star Wars ships out there. But one of the very first was the Skyhopper. Yes, the T-16 Skyhopper, to be exact. Now, for those of you saying it wasn't in the film, well, of course, there's the moment that Luke is playing with a model of one of them, so, that puts it in the film, right? Heck, they even made an action figure of Luke playing with a toy of this ship. So it's a toy of a toy of a toy? I don't know, it confuses me. But the actual ship's there, too. If you look behind Luke, when 3PO is getting his little bath, that's Luke's Skyhopper there. And we did see it in the Return of the Jedi Special Edition, swooping in over Mos Eisley, Mos Espa, Mos something. Alright, but the reason that this ship is underrated, well, first of all, it's because it goes all the way back to the beginning, like one of the very first ships ever created for Star Wars. And like a lot of Star Wars ships, it was created by Colin Cantwell, who is absolutely one of the unsung heroes of Star Wars. He created the look of essentially the whole ship part of the universe. And he did a lot of early work on the Skyhopper, specifically because it was originally going to be the star of the whole opening action scene of the movie, kicking it off, where we would see Luke and some of his friends from Tatooine flying through Beggar's Canyon at breakneck speeds in a race to see, well, who had the biggest Skyhopper. Let's leave it at that. Alright, so while we didn't get to see this in the movie, we did get to see it in the Marvel Comics, and exquisitely told in the Star Wars radio drama. If you have not listened to this, I highly recommend it. That first episode that takes place on Tatooine, wow, it's amazing. So yes, it's a huge race through Beggar's Canyon, which eventually we did see, and that's always been a sort of a sticking point for me. When we finally saw a race through Beggar's Canyon, and that would be first in Phantom Menace, although we also saw the same race, sort of, against himself in The Mandalorian, and yes, that was the exact same trail that The Mandalorian was going along. Here's a comparison, you can see the same spot in The Phantom Menace where the gate gets busted through, well, before it does, and then, 30, 40 years later, I guess no more than that, the gate still hasn't been fixed, and Mandalorian raced through the same exact place, Beggar's Canyon, which was supposed to be where the T-16s raced, and where they were racing was this, what's never been seen on screen. Okay, this is a really bad, weird Lego version, but this is the Stone Needle, and this was the whole point of racing through Beggar's Canyon, because if you could thread the Stone Needle going through that stone hole there in the archway, you could cut off enough time that you could win the race. It was very dangerous, and not seeing this in Phantom Menace, when we had a race through Beggar's Canyon and the Stone Needle was not part of it, I mean, that was the whole first action scene from the original draft of A New Hope, which, again, made it into the radio drama and every other adaptation, but not the actual movie, which is probably good because it would have thrown off the pacing. But we never get to see the Stone Needle. It's even shown up in Shadows of the Empire, and it's this brilliant way of, getting ahead of your competition, because if you can thread the Stone Needle, and having it not be part of Phantom Menace or Mandalorian when we saw someone running through Beggar's Canyon, alright, Vader understands my frustration. Well, we have gotten a few toys of this over the years, different companies taking stabs at doing Skyhoppers, which, again, is really cool, because this ship was such an integral part of Luke's youth, and when it was designed by Colin so early in the process, like before X-Wings, before Millennium Falcons, the T-16 Skyhopper design was created. And it was such a good idea that, well, it didn't want to get flushed away. And it eventually evolved into the Imperial Shuttle. And it's the other reason why this ship is so important. Because the whole idea of Star Wars ships with folding wings, well, that's because of the T-16. If Colin had not created the T-16 with that look, we wouldn't have folding wing TIE fighters, which we know are the coolest thing ever. All right, but yes, but folding wings and the general shuttle design with the 3 wings, that's all from the T-16. And while it never got screen time and its legacy lives on as the Tiderian shuttle or the Imperial shuttle, the original prop created as almost the very first vehicle prop for Star Wars just does not get the celebration it should for how early it cemented something that became a huge part of the series. Not to mention the fact that Luke's entire backstory is wound up in this ship. I mean, this is the ship that he flies around killing giant 2-meter womp rats. Yeah, because that's, well, I guess actually that's more like killing a bear, is it, versus killing, like, a rodent. So I guess that's more acceptable. It's like big game hunting, except you're in a ship shooting at it from, like, way in the sky. That's real fair, Luke. Well, anyway, so yes, when he talked about flying through Begos Canyon in his T-16 back home, bam, that was that. And while it has now been regulated to one of many Star Wars vehicles out there, see, it's all the way on the right, at the very end, top, like right before the corner there, yeah. I mean, it had a micro machine, of course. All the ships in the Galoob line actually made it into the line. It's one of the only complete Star Wars vehicle lines in existence. Well, I mean, it doesn't have ships that weren't out at the time it came out. But the success of including it in things like Micro Machine did see it go on to be in other lines, like the Action Fleet line. Although this one, since it had to be very kid-friendly and have an action feature, not only did it come with Luke and Biggs, but you also got a giant red Probot missile thing. I don't know. I get it. I get why you've got to add giant missiles to toys. It sells them to kids, but, I like me a Skyhopper. So even the Lego versions, and there's been a couple over the years in different scales, not quite my cup of tea. I do like Lego sets, and I think it's more lack of having display space, where I probably would have bought and built this one, because I do really love T-16s for the role they play in the overall development of the franchise and the role they play in Luke's development. I was very excited to get the Titanium Series one. This one's perfect for the desk because it's not too small like the Micro Machine, and because it has a dedicated stand, you can actually display it. I believe the gun rotates to the back in the actual canon, but we still haven't gotten a toy that's done this. Probably the best toy has been the Kenner, quote-unquote, Hasbro, Luke's T-16 Skyhopper that came out at the end of the middle of Power of the Force 2. I was blown away that they even made this. I mean, again, for a vehicle that never showed up in the movie, but just plays a part in the lore of Luke's sort of coming of age and his skill set, as well as the general Star Wars creative story, being such an early ship design that wound up influencing so many other ship designs. It made a great Kenner toy. I mean, they came up with a way of doing a twofer where you could pull it apart and you could have like a smaller desert skiff and actually see Luke and then plug it into the main body. I mean, obviously it doesn't do this in any content, the movie or whatever, but, as a toy feature, no problem with this, especially because it doesn't affect displaying it as a whole piece. I mean, sure, you see that little cut line running up the wing, but it just looks like a fuselage. So yeah, this is a great example of putting a kid feature into a toy that can still appeal to a collector. And like I noted earlier, Luke plays with this in the movie. I mean, they made an action figure of him with the toy, the whole meta thing, toy with a toy with a toy, like, that guy in Scarlet Widow had an action figure for himself. Anyway, so this also could be a prop replica. Yep, Luke's playing with a toy, so if you, buy the action figure size one, it's about the right size. And now that we know the whole backstory, I can't believe this prop got a backstory. That's crazy. But yeah, kind of actually of all props to get a backstory and to link this to Obi-Wan, boy, Luke sure cleaned it up a lot, didn't he? Obi-Wan's was a mess. Well, obviously, besides the fact that it's the ship that inspired Luke and gave him the opportunity to train to run an INCOM fighter, the Skyhopper is made by the same company that makes the INCOM X-Wing. The INCOM T-16 is the Skyhopper. So yeah, this is just another model by the same company. And the fact that Luke had so much experience on a T-16 is what allowed him to go on and, use the Force and blow up the Death Star and yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, why some random farm boy just shows up at the Rebel base and gets handed the keys to an X-Wing? Because he could fly one. He had a lot of practice. We never got to see this. and we came so close in Phantom Menace and in Mandalorian. But for me, it's why the Skyhopper really stands out as one of the most important yet underrated ships in the entire Star Wars galaxy. We may never get to see that swooping and going through the Stone Needle, but in my mind and in the Star Wars radio drama, it'll last forever. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was a good look at one of those inside pockets of the Star Wars universe. Have your own personal T-16 stories? What does it mean to you? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for sharing this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.